Tonight on Straight Talk, a $14 billion price tag to replace the bridge thousands cross every day.
The cheapest bridge you're going to build is the one you start today.
What's driving that number, and how long before anyone breaks ground? As the Vancouver mayor sits down with us to discuss why this aging I-5 crossing can't wait.
It's outdated, it's vulnerable to earthquakes, and it was built on timber pilings down in the sand. We like to say it's like pretzels and chocolate pudding.
Plus, it's not just infrastructure shaping this region's future. A first-of-its-kind study reveals how sports are quietly becoming one of Oregon's biggest economic engines.
But one thing is right in front of us that's producing right now is the sports economy.
From stadium renovations to a new professional team returning to Portland, how the industry is creating jobs, drawing visitors, and pumping millions into local businesses.
This is one of the most productive industries.
Ahead on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Tim Gordon. The Interstate Bridge is old. The first span opening in 1917, the second span in 1958. Currently, it sees about 140,000 vehicles a day traveling on I-5 across the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. For more than 20 years, serious efforts to replace the bridge have so far not created a new one. The current Interstate Bridge Replacement program has it as close as it's ever been, but at an increased cost. And joining us today to talk about it is Vancouver Mayor Anne McInerney-Ogle. It's so great to have you here, Mayor.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, and we're glad you're here, especially because you're on the IBR Executive Steering Committee.
Right.
So you're in the know here. Let's talk about the big question that's coming up from the new total cost estimate. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It really is. $14.4 billion now for everything. That includes a lot more than just the bridge. Right. Can you kind of break it down for us what that pays for?
All right. So that is 5 miles of work, and it'll be built in phases. The first phase is the bridge, getting on and off of the bridge, getting light rail to Vancouver, and then removing the old bridge. That's just phase 1. That is that $7.5 billion part of it. And then the rest of it are the on-ramps and off-ramps, those 7 interchanges that are in Oregon and Washington, Slough Bridge and all of that. So you're talking work all the way up to 2045.
Yeah.
So it's a long ways out.
Timeline, yeah, for sure. So where do things stand right now? We know we got Coast Guard approval for a fixed span. That's very important, right?
Yes.
And you're happy about that, I know.
Yes, absolutely. 116 feet, a fixed span, 2 bridges together. But, oh, how exciting that happened.
I know as a commuter from Vancouver to Portland and back, yeah, drawbridge, kind of what we want to get away from, right? So that is good news for those of us who have waited many minutes in line to have a drawbridge up. Yep. Where do things stand right now and what's next?
So this is 2026. Everyone has signed the final supplemental environmental impact statement. It's back at the federal level. They need to review everything, and then they need to publish that final supplemental EIS. As that comes forward, everyone takes a look at all thousands and thousands of comments, and then we move forward to the federal government giving what they call the record of decision, the ROD. I would love to have that May 20th. It might be a little later, first part of June. As that ROD comes forward, that is the permission slip to say, keep going, you got this. Okay. So then they put out the request for the construction, the company that's going to build the bridge. When that happens, that will be in 2027. That company then finishes the engineering for the bridge, because right now it's in the conceptual level.
Sure, we've seen the rendering.
Exactly. That progressive build allows the design to move forward, the permits to start happening with construction in 2028. Yay.
To start,
yes.
Right. Do we know who the contractor is yet, or is it going to be? Yeah, I'm sure there are a couple top candidates for a large project like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think many people may look at the costs here and say, wow, you know, it's not the $3.4 billion of 2013, it's not the $6 billion of just 2022.
I know.
Can you briefly tell us how we got here and how today's economy plays right into this?
So this bridge was much cheaper way back in the last century, and then in 2013 when it was moving forward, and then everything stopped.
Yep.
So inflation and tariffs and just the world has changed since this project stopped in the teens. As we look at this, the new engineers came forward, redesigned what they thought was a simpler opportunity. As they also looked at it, the cost has escalated tremendously. But then they also added in the risk. So you'll see on the IBR's website a chart that shows the basic cost for construction. And then 4.2 billion is the risk, and then escalation expectations. So that's how you get to that 14.5 billion.
Describe the risk part, because I think people may not understand what that means.
400 different opportunities for the cost to go up. Not just the cost of materials, not just the cost of labor, but what happens when you miss a window of construction in the Columbia River because we have high water, we have fish, we have environmental concerns, we have storms, we have something. So when the engineers and all of those people who specialize in risk of a project, they know all the different opportunities that things can go to hell in a basket.
Sure.
And they add that in, and that's 4 billion of that.
Yeah, so if they're experts on
Yes.
on figuring risk, then it's
That's
probably a
right.
pretty good chance we will actually burn that money
And
in
there-
those ways.
You're right. And there's never been a project in the United States or Europe, China or Japan that came in at that initial estimate. It's always doubled or multiplied by 3 and 5. Even Eisenhower's interstate project was 5 times higher than he thought it was going to be.
So we shouldn't get our hopes up that that risk isn't going to happen and we're going to save $4 billion by any stretch.
No.
Okay,
no.
well, it's an expensive project.
It is.
It is a huge project.
It is.
You know, despite all the effort to create a design that is the LPA, the locally preferred alternative, you still hear all the different ideas that people have, a tunnel
Right.
under the river, you know, leave the old bridge up and build others next to it. I don't know. What do you say to that at this point? And because that is there's still criticism and people weighing in on what should actually happen.
It's kind of like armchair quarterbacks. Did they understand that we don't have bedrock underneath the Columbia River? It's gravel. They understand how seismically fragile this area is? I don't want to be under the Columbia River in a tunnel when the earthquake happens.
Yeah.
So as we looked at that, as the IBR looked at, as both states and everyone looked at that, they knew that we needed to move forward above the water, keep going.
Yep. How do you like the design?
I love the fixed bridge. Wide, pedestrian, all of the bike and everything else, because you know now when you're on that sidewalk, it makes you nervous
It's a little-
because the
yeah.
bridge bounces. So is the design perfect? Not yet, but that's why we have a progressive build. We'll have the engineers in, take a look at it, especially the light rail, getting it into Vancouver. Where will it go? Where will it terminate?
Yep. You know, this timeline, so we get a contractor and they start on the
Right.
bridge, but 2045 is the completion date for everything. That just feels so far out.
It is.
Yeah. How long will it take to do the bridge, just the bridge? And will that, you know, I don't know how that will work with the other pieces not in place.
If
but-
they start in 2028 and the river is safe to build in and construct in, they think that they can get done with that by 2035. So getting that bridge piece done and the on and off ramps, that will be a 6 to 7 year completion time.
Yep.
You know, in Vancouver, it's a very tight space to work around. On the Portland side, we have larger areas to work with. But I have the confidence that once they get started, things will go quickly. We could probably get that done in 6 years.
Okay. Tolling is part of the equation.
It is.
Before the new bridge is even up, tolling is expected to start for commuters on the old bridge.
Yeah.
How soon do you expect that to start? And what are you hearing from Vancouver
During
Rights about
construction.
that? During construction.
During
Once
construction.
construction starts.
So when the construction starts in 2028, the tolling will start because we're paying for the this project.
Yeah.
There isn't a single project in the United States that doesn't have tolling as part of the construction of a mega project of this size.
Right. And I know there's a chart that kind of shows what it
Yes.
probably could be, roughly a bit more at peak times and so forth.
Right. If you're at 1 o'clock in the morning and you're headed somewhere, you probably won't have any toll at all. If you wanted to go at 8 o'clock in the morning during the peak time, you're going to be paying a higher price.
Yeah.
So we may not want to go to Jansen Beach to buy shampoo. We may want to stay in Vancouver to do that.
But if you got to get to work on time, you
That's
have to
right.
go at 8 o'clock and you will pay a price.
Yes, and you'll have to figure that out.
Yep. Talk about light rail just a little bit. I don't have it in my sheet here, but I want to bring it up. How are you feeling about that? How do you think the public is feeling about that? It was such a difficult issue that kind of killed the CRC, the Columbia River Crossing Project, before when Washington didn't come up with the money. Where does that stand?
And that, Tim, that is why 8.5 years ago, the Vancouver City Council said, we want to replace the bridge with a high-capacity transit in a dedicated guideway, boom, boom, boom. And it was decided 8.5 years ago that we would bring light rail in and stop it in downtown Vancouver. That was a contract between the two states. We wanted something to happen on the I-5 bridge, so did Portland. And that was an agreement between the two states that that would happen. Now, we want it to come to Library Square at the Evergreen Boulevard right now. So we're in agreement with all of the partners to bring that all the way over and drop it right there at Evergreen. And so we're looking at all the costs and benefits of engineering that and getting that in there, because we know that we're building for the future, not just for 20 years out.
Right. For those who aren't familiar with Vancouver, that's pretty near Clark College, which is there on the...
No.
Oh, no.
No. You're right. That's the old project.
Oh, my goodness.
The old CRC took it up. This drops it closer to City Hall, to our library on Evergreen.
Oh, at Evergreen. Oh,
That's right.
my
Where
mistake. Okay,
No, where
that's
Evergreen
changed.
goes over.
Yeah.
That new library right there. The Academy is across the street, that whole downtown area. So it would come down off of the bridge and stop right there.
Why is that a good spot?
It is the hub of where all of our bus rapid transits and our local buses transition. And that's the opportunity for all of those BRTs and walkers and bikers and everyone else to come in. It's right there. We own the property. We could have parking underneath, transit-oriented development, affordable housing up above it. And it's right next to I-5. It's across from the National Park. It's a perfect spot for us.
Perfect. Well, I've known you for quite a while now, and I know you're a big proponent of an interstate bridge replacement. In a minute or so, give us your best pitch. Why is this so important to happen?
Well, seismically, it is not a strong bridge. And as you had in your video, it is Douglas fir trees sunk in mud.
Right.
That doesn't give us the confidence. And if you've ever walked on it or stopped when the bridge goes up, you're bouncing. So we need a seismically safe bridge. But $132 million of commodities go across that bridge every day. We need this regional economy to keep going. A fixed bridge allows that. Getting rid of the lift means that we continue moving forward with all of the commuters, the freight, and we don't have a stop sign between Canada and Mexico.
That's right. Yeah, it was a major stoppage
It
spot
is.
on I-5. And the financing is more than $5 million. We should be good to get started, right?
We'll figure it out. There hasn't been a project of this magnitude that doesn't get finished and the funding is found.
All right. Well, Mayor Ann McInerney-Ogle, thanks so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you, Tim.
We appreciate it.
You bet.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and coming up, the numbers behind the game. We sit down with the folks behind a new report showing just how much money sports is bringing into Oregon. Stay with us. Welcome back to Straight Talk. As local leaders look to turn around a rather grim economic outlook for the Portland Metro, a bright spot can be found at sports stadiums and arenas, but that reach goes far beyond the Rose City. A new report gives a holistic view of the impact of spectator sports how they have across Oregon, which in 2024 brought in almost $2 billion. With a new WNBA team coming and upgrades to Moda Center on the horizon, experts say sports is doing more than entertaining fans. It's really shaping the state's economic future. Let's bring in two people who are really behind this report. It's great to have you guys here. Mike Wilkerson, Director of Economic Research at Eco Northwest, and Jim Etzel, CEO of Sport Oregon. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Well, let's talk about the study. This is the first of its kind study, statewide study, really looking at the economics of spectator sports, specifically in professional and D1, Division I college sports. Mike, I'm going to start with you. You've described this as a real bright spot in an otherwise kind of iffy Oregon economy. What did you find?
Yeah, let's first talk about the top line numbers and then kind of talk about why that's a bright spot for Oregon. So we found through extensive surveying and engagement with organizations across the state that in 1 year roughly brought in about $1.7 billion. And that's a pretty conservative number in the sense that we're not looking at all sport, and Jim can talk more about that. But that supports about 9,000 jobs across the economy.
And that was 2024.
2024, correct. And so that doesn't count, for example, fire, and we can talk more about that. But when you look broadly across the economy, Oregon is struggling right now. Struggling to add jobs, struggling to attract population in the way that it historically has. But one of the bright spots in the Oregon economy has been the ability to bring in outside dollars from other parts of the country. And that's called a traded sector. And historically, we've looked at semiconductors as kind of the bright spot poster child for that. No state has a larger share of semiconductors contributing to their economy than Oregon. And the state for years has supported that industry. So now we look at sport and we know it's an important part, but we haven't really had the data to support how important it is and think about it as equally contributing to the state's growth of a traded sector economy. And so now that we have this data as a baseline, we can kind of look at that. And we're starting to see some legislative efforts around supporting MODA, supporting PDP and other efforts. But really, this is an opportunity to leverage this as a strength in Oregon.
Were you surprised by the results?
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, we had no idea where we were starting from. No one has done this before. And so our best guess is Oregon is about the 10th most kind of important state in terms of sports economy. And that's with not a whole lot of effort. And I think understanding the opportunity here is huge, and that a little bit of additional effort and public-private collaboration can really be a growth opportunity for the state.
Yeah. Jim, you've been leading Sport Oregon for coming up on a decade now. You should probably describe for people what that organization is, but also this statewide study, why was it so important? And beyond the $1.7 billion in overall economic impact, what stood out to you?
Well, what was really important to us was to define what this economy is in Oregon. And, industry-wide, nationally, it's massive, both on the spectator sports tourism side, which is over $100 billion in economic impact in the U.S. alone, and then participatory sports is close to $130 billion a year.
Wow.
And so we're always asked, when we talk about our value proposition and the opportunity here is, what is it in Oregon? And so that's where we're teaming up with Mike and his team and really digging in with our DMO partners and our university and professional partners around the state. Let's dig into these numbers and really define this. The numbers are very conservative, and that was really intentional, that transparency, because credibility is so critical to our success.
Sure.
Trust, all those things, especially with policy leaders and the public. Yeah. So when we talk, we want people to know that what we're talking about is real and it's attainable. What gets me excited beyond the numbers that Mike talked about is to me, it shows that there's tons of room for growth. And most of it is very reachable, attainable within what we have right now. It's all about focus and reasonable resources put to bear, but then also talking about the larger opportunity with some investments. We're the most underbuilt state, one of the top or bottom 10 states for the built environment for our community and recreation play with think fields and courts, but how we can leverage those just not for community wellness and quality of life, but how do we do it for economic gain? And that's that big participatory sports tourism segment. So that's what excites us.
And as a leader of an organization that promotes sport in Oregon, you got to feel good about what you see.
Yeah, absolutely. And this validates the investments that have been made in our organization on an annual basis by the corporate community out there. We're a nonprofit, we're a member-funded organization, so it's all about ROI on people's investment in us, and this is gratifying.
So the Portland metro area is obviously the epicenter of professional spectator sports in Oregon, and then a few spots like Eugene and Corvallis, as you can imagine, really probably lead the collegiate level. Mike, I thought the data on that was pretty interesting, how that breaks down in terms of attendees, college versus professional.
Yeah, I don't know what the perception is, and frankly, I think we didn't really know what to expect when we looked at that. And so being able to quantify the 4 million people that attended events, and that's really undercounting the one-off kind of individual events. But on the professional side, we have almost 2 million attendees, and that's, as you mentioned, largely in Portland, and that will grow as we're continuing to add franchises. But on the collegiate level, it was 1.7 million, so not that far behind. And I think this is, again, seeing Big Ten growth opportunities and continuing expansion of facilities to support that. So it's pretty evenly distributed across the state.
Yeah, and a lot of out-of-state non-resident visitors to collegiate sports kind of makes sense because teams come in to play U of O or OSU, and that adds to that out-of-state visitor.
That's the huge driver of the economy, right, is bringing in those out-of-state dollars. And so for collegiate events, we estimate about a quarter of those people are coming from out of state.
Okay. Soon we'll be having a new professional sports team right here in Portland, the Portland Fire, soon to start their season. Pretty exciting stuff. You guys, what are you expecting to see there? I want to hear from both of you on the impact of the Portland Fire.
You want to talk about the numbers first?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Portland is the epicenter of women's sports. And so adding another franchise and being able to quantify that, I think is a great opportunity to tell that story. And again, this is just a growth opportunity of understanding when we continue to invest in our public resources of facilities, that it does facilitate growth.
Yeah, I've been saying for quite a while now that infrastructure creates opportunity, and having an NBA arena, and we are a basketball town. Getting the WNBA is a tremendous opportunity. What I'm really excited about is how does the Rose Quarter perform in our prime weather months. Think about Blazer games. We come out and we're dodging raindrops and it's dark and everything. Like the Rose Quarter Plaza is the largest public plaza in the city. But what does what's that ecosystem going to look like on game day, both pregame and postgame, and also just where the long-term development opportunities in that district are going to go from, to create a really mixed-use entertainment district that's sticky and there's things for people to walk out and into.
There's a lot of opportunities there to make that happen, yeah. But yet, a lot of people will say sports are great, but God, $600 million to renovate the Moda Center, how can we afford that? Make the case for it being important to do.
Well, I would say, how can we not afford it? Mm-hmm. We're a top 25 market. Every top 25 market, if you want to maintain that, position, you have to have vibrant arts and sports facilities. And we're challenged in that we have facilities, but a lot of them have significant deferred maintenance. They're not modernized for the modern patron experience, and operationally are becoming more and more inefficient for the tenants and the opportunities to bring in those buildings. You look from a state investment standpoint, there's very few things that the state invests in that they get a return on. And this report starts to define and improve that at a very conservative baseline. So every dollar invested in the Moda Center renovation is going to come back on a plus column to the state in economic impact and return. And that does not happen in very many state investments. Then the added benefits are it ensures we keep the Portland Trailblazers. It ensures we have an arena that is going to be able to nurture and grow a WNBA team and not have the WNBA team in the same situation. Understanding too that you hear the billionaire argument. Well, this is a publicly owned building. It's city and state owned. It is not, so from a private investor standpoint, but that billionaire tenant, primary tenant of the Blazers, only represents 20 to 25% of the event nights that are in the Moda Center. Yeah. And so what's Portland look like? How do we maintain, being a desirable, livable place, whether without sports, without arts? And that's eventually we don't want the Women's Final Four in 2030 to be the last major event. We want it to be the first of many moving forward.
Right, and you say it would be the last one if we don't do this work.
We today, with the arena where it's at 5 years after we bid for this, we would probably not be considered. Not probably, we wouldn't be. We know so.
30 seconds left. It's important to note that this study doesn't cover everything, right? We've got other sports happening in Oregon. Briefly describe what you'd like to see in the next study.
Well, earlier I referenced participatory sports. In our industry, in the sports tourism industry, it's divided into two things: spectator sports tourism and participatory sports tourism. Right now, Oregon is an export state. We just send our families out to play everywhere on every weekend. There's no inbound coming in. How do we keep Oregon families here competing and also creating opportunities for kind of our underserved community to have those same experiences that they might not be able to afford from the travel play industry?
Yeah, great conversation on this. I really appreciate both of you coming in. Jim?
Yeah,
Thanks for the opportunity.
And thank you for joining us. A reminder, you can stream Straight Talk on your own schedule. Download the free TV app, KGW Plus, available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. We'll see you back here next week.